Hello and welcome back to Bricks and Banner, the show with real talk from the custom LEGO community. I'm your host as always, Billy, and before we get started, I want to let you know that on our Instagram page, that's bricks_and_banter, there's a wrap-up post with every episode that I put up that contains some images relating to the things we discussed, so if you're feeling a little lost or want to check something out that we've discussed, there might be an image there that's corresponding to it, so might fill you in, maybe it won't, maybe I forgot to add it in. You know, it is what it is, but also, while you're there, you could go and repost that post onto your story and, get a little love for the pod out there, show it off to your friends, because, hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, anybody who's following you probably will too. Currently, that's one of the best ways to support the podcast, so I would appreciate any shares, send it off to a friend, or even if you go on Spotify or iTunes, you can rate us 5 stars if you enjoyed it. And, well, if you didn't enjoy it, then I guess don't rate it 5 stars. But, I mean, I guess I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast. You could continue listening. But if you continue listening, then you're probably going to enjoy it, so then you're probably going to rate it 5. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Let's just move into it. This episode, we have a pioneer of the community, somebody who has helped shape the custom scene as we know it today. He started one of the oldest and most notable custom accessory brands to date. That's right, we're joined today by Kyle Peterson, the founder of BrickForge. We discussed the origins of LEGO talk on internet forums, the ins and outs of developing BrickForge, why he ultimately decided to sell his company, and so much more. So with no further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Kyle Peterson. And we're here with Kyle Peterson, the man behind BrickForge, the founder. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. This really came about just out of the blue. I was not expecting this to work out or get a response, but I've really appreciated your feedback so far and your willingness to do this. So I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Entirely my pleasure.
All right, so we might as well just get right into it. What I'm curious about, even before we get into BrickForge stuff, was were you an AFOL before creating BrickForge, or did the creation of BrickForge sort of involve you into the community?
I was absolutely a lifelong fan of Lego. Um, when I graduated college, I kind of found myself single with nothing else to do, and I sent for my little suitcase of Lego I had since I was a child, and that kind of sparked, reignited that interest in Lego bricks, and soon I started buying them off the shelf and found a community online through the old Usenet groups, the Recreation Arts Lego, and sure enough, I became an AFOL.
That's not a forum I've heard of before. That's interesting. Around what year was that?
Well, that's going to date me. So that was in, boy, those Usenet groups were 1990, early 1990s. And I,
No kidding.
yeah,
Goodness,
um,
man. That is
right,
incredible.
dialing up on the modem and everything. Um, and I think I found the Lego group in 1996. Recreation Arts Toys Lego, I think, was kind of that meta URL to get to the other Lego enthusiasts that were also online at the time.
Wow. I sincerely did not recognize that the online community went that far back. Um,
Oh yeah.
which I'm sure is naive of me being a kid in the internet age, but wow. What was the community like that back then? What sort of stuff was being shared around?
Well, Recreation, uh, oh, what is it? Rec Arts Toys Lego was actually Rec Arts Toys, and it was just anything from model railroads to Star Wars action
Hmm.
figures to Lego, and eventually those subgroups, those demographics grew too large that Usenet started breaking those groups out. It was probably mostly older men building really incredible models and They would share their photos, but sometimes on the dial-up age, those photos took, about 30 minutes to load up. So it was mostly discussion about the Lego themes at the time. And eventually those discussions started steering towards how boring and homogenous the minifigs were becoming.
It's interesting to know that the sentiment to start customizing Lego was even present back then.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw the same swords since the '80s and the same helmets, and so I don't believe there was a customization subgroup on Usenet. I don't think it ever grew that large, um, but Eurobricks popped up, and
Mm-hmm.
also ClassicCastle.com was a pretty prolific website. It was growing pretty large, and a lot of the discussion was just how the castle figures at the time were just the same as they were a decade earlier, and that sparked a lot of the creativity and some of the collaboration on how can we start making these minifigs more unique.
Mm. What were some of the solutions people had at the time to start customizing them?
They were pretty primitive. Water slide decals were extremely popular back then. Laserjet printers, specifically color laserjet printers, started popping up. They were a little expensive, but you could print on water slide decal paper and you could kind of trim it out to the shape of the torso or the arms or even the Lego minifigure head. And you can design your own custom figures that way. We were playing around with something called Sculpey, uh,
Oh yeah, yeah.
uh, making custom helmets and hats and swords and weapons that way. Eventually, that turned into resin. Some of us started experimenting with that. Let's see, who is it? There was somebody who's really into resin. I can't think of his name right off the bat. He's the one who he made the original like Twi'lek heads and the female curved torso
Oh,
bodies.
good. Area light.
Yeah, Aerolite. He was heavily into these resin casts, um, and he made some excellent, just excellent models using resin.
Mm. So I'm assuming you were experimenting a little bit at the time with the customization. What really sparked you to start going down the path to creating BrickForge?
Well, before BrickForge, you know, there was I guess I better go in order here. There was this concerted effort to try and make something professional. And resin
Mm.
doesn't cut it, Sculpey doesn't cut it. I was making great helms out of Sculpey. Aerolite was just getting in the resin. There was, a whole bunch of us. Caminoin or Caminoin. I think we can probably call him Jared. I won't say his last name, but he was doing some awesome sculpts of Star Wars character heads specifically, awesome decal work, a great artist. And there's another gentleman who lived in Hong Kong, and his name was Red Bean. We all had our fun internet handles at the time. And
Hmm.
Red Bean and I got together, and we were trying to find a way to turn these resin or Sculpey designs into legitimate, professionally plastic injected molded accessories. And that was right around 2000, 2001.
Hmm. That's much further back than I expected. I mean, but we've already started so far back. So how did it continue with you and Red Bean there?
So, being in Hong Kong, he had access to plastic injection molded factories, and so we, collaborated on some swords and weapons that he wanted to make. We've always been stuck with the Lego bow and arrow with the arrow molded onto the bow, and we're like, well, we need to make a bow that doesn't have an arrow on it. And so that was one of the first seven products, which I would call mold one, eventually turned over to a BrickForge mold. We collaborated on a second mold and a third one. And then after the third one, Red Bean decided, he wanted to become an educator. Um, and so he felt like just, the best thing to do to keep this going was just to kind of turn everything over to me. And so he just kind of shipped me all the inventory. And boy, the day I received that, it was like a kid in a candy store. I just couldn't believe I had all these awesome items that he had created with some input from myself, and just seeing it in person was awesome. And so I set to task developing a much smoother way to actually sell these to the other people that wanted them. Prior to that, it was just a forum. It was like an internet forum, and you'd fill out this form, and somebody would get this form in an email, and it would say, "I want this, 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 and this," and we would manually total it up, email back an invoice, and then they would actually, believe it or not, send us a personal check for
In the
the
mail.
amount.
Goodness.
And then when the check cleared, we would pack up the order and ship it to them. That is the early days of mail order.
Wow. Just going back a little bit, working with Red Bean, were you still operating with sculpted stuff and then using a process to get them into sort of like a full injection mold, or was that that point they started to like model these pieces uh, digitally?
Yeah, so all of the original items were based on a sculpt. And
Wow.
the manufacturer took the sculpt, and I believe they do what's called like a wax cast of it.
Yeah.
And then they use that cast to actually tool the mold. So they were built on the original sculpts by Red Bean, and in those early days for those first three molds, my input was just limited to, I think the corner's too sharp on this hoplite helmet. I think the detail might be too rich on the dragon sword, and that was it. But he was really the mastermind behind creating those original pieces and getting them set up to be manufactured. A little bit later, we moved strictly to CAD design.
Mm. No, that is really amazing because I love the personal touch that casting stuff provides, where you actually have the artist's like handwork in a way, but injection molding certainly provides a polish that is difficult to match with resin casting. So moving on, where did things go for you once you had all that stock in hand?
Well, we had this this group of customizers, right? We had I call them Camino in. I'm sorry, I know it's probably pronounced different. There was Ramus and Red Bean and Aerialite. A lot of these Damien Knight, all these early pioneers of customization. Even the enigma that is Badger was on these forums, and we had a great time discussing what should we make next, what should we do. So we started this alliance called the Minifig Customization Network, and it was MCN for short. And the whole idea was we were going to take these Red Bean items, and that was going to be kind of our flagship product. And then we were going to add Camino and decals and all these other things to this online store, the MCN store. And so we started this forum. We quickly grew. We had like people like QuickBlade show up, and just all these avid customizers. And so in 2004, 2005, we started this idea of the MCN network. And so I got all the stuff from Hong Kong, and I was setting on this online shop. And then I think what we ended up with just too many cooks in the kitchen, is probably the
Hmm.
best way I could say that, is everybody wanted to go different ways in terms of, great, what should we do next? And so the MCN network was somewhat short lived. The forum stayed, but there were some divisions, and that kind of, I'm going to take my banner and march over to this side, and I'm going to go on this side. And we just kind of all parted ways and realized, well, while we can collaborate together on a forum and stroke each other's ego, when it comes down to actually selling something for a profit, we all had different ideas of what that needed to look like, and that's where BrickForge grew out of.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, just continue us on the path. How did you actually start to create BrickForge as its own entity?
Well, I mean, we just said, hey, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to make a variety of different accessories for the use, for the purpose of minifig customization what should we call ourselves? And we really liked that medieval theme. So, well, we're a forge. Yeah, sure. What are we forging? Well, we can't say we're a minifig forge. We're not going to be custom forge. And we certainly couldn't say we were Lego forge. So we did what every other company was starting to do and just put brick in front of our
Yep. Yep.
terminology. So we became BrickForge. Our logo was a brick and an anvil at first. We created a mascot called the Angry Dwarf Smith, and he was kind of a grumpy mascot. And we just started taking our pieces to shows and revamping the online forum into an actual early shopping cart. And that started to streamline our efforts. And I think every few months we just started to double in growth. I mean, the sales volume just kept going and going. We just couldn't believe what we had started.
Mm. So, what did you do to continue from there, creating new products now that Red Bean was out of the picture?
Yeah, so early on, I think actually the first vendor to make plastic injected molded accessories was Little Armory,
Mm.
and they were based out of I think Baltimore, Maryland. Uh, Boy, it could have been in Pennsylvania too, but somewhere southern Pennsylvania, that area. Um, and your listeners may recognize the vendor Little Arms Shop. They had been in cahoots for a while, but had a falling through. Um, Little Army kind of dropped off the map, and then Brick Arms showed up in 2005, I believe, 2006. And so, right when MCN was breaking up and BrickForge was starting, Brick Arms was beginning to launch their first products. And that was kind of that first, oh, Red Beam, there's somebody else doing this. We need to hurry up and decide what we're going to make. And we had this mini arms race for several years between Brick Arms and BrickForge. And it was really just who could put out what the quickest. Oh, we better make this before Brick Arms does because we don't want to have two in the market, which
Mm.
which was inevitable. I mean, it was inevitable that there was going to be some duplication. Even with the Lego company, there was duplication. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Especially nowadays.
oh yeah, well they clearly saw what we were doing in the market, and they had absolutely no bones about picking our ideas and mimicking them to a certain degree. And so it was just okay. What are we doing for mold 7? What are we doing for mold 8? And at BrickForge, we were trying to diversify. So we were like, well, let's do instruments. Let's do animals. Let's do scooters. And at that time, Aerialite had a resin scooter, and so we contracted with him to actually make that into a professionally injected molded accessory. So we were
Oh, that's
trying to
great.
stick with variety, and Brick Arms was sticking with really I would call it firearms and rifles, and they did it really well. They were excellent at how they dropped their new items. The Enigma that is Badger, kind of sided with with Will and in that aspect. And we had kind of our cohort of people, ironclad BrickForge enthusiasts, and so it was really just what could we make the quickest that had the most application. How could we draw in fans from different genres?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is something I've really enjoyed about your products when I first got exposed to them was that they pulled on many different genres and had a lot of compatibility with just like generic sort of Lego themes. Um, you really had um, a broad appeal with your product lines, which was great.
Well,
So
thanks. Yeah.
you mentioned that the demand was like insane, more than you were expecting, and you were just growing exponentially at a certain point. How are you guys managing with that? Did you have to start onboarding employees? Did you have to get a shop, a workspace?
Yeah, absolutely. We just like any small business, we started in the basement,
Mm-hmm.
and then we ended up in a bigger basement. Eventually, we hired two young strapping men to come and work for us, and after about a year, got tired of having people walk in our basement every day. So we moved out in 2011 to a shop in nearby Yellow Springs, Ohio. And that was a pretty significant move for us because that particular shop had a retail space built in.
Oh,
So we were able to do BrickForge in the back area and have a retail space where we sold BrickForge. And then, of course, we got into selling other construction related toys. We would do birthday parties. And so we started to grow in many different directions. And, we just kept hiring people. I think at our highest point, I had about 8 employees on the books. Anything from order fulfillment to working the retail shop to doing birthdays to doing the CAD design.
that's great. Did the retail shop really? I don't know. I always see the retail shops, and it would be great to have something like that locally, but it's difficult to imagine them sustaining themselves. Did that actually work well in your area?
It worked well in our area, and the great thing was because the retail part was really just an
The
add-on.
secondary, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't have to be. We didn't have to feed our family on the retail aspect of it. But what people appreciated the most was the trading and the older sets. We would often buy collections, dust them off, fill in whatever missing pieces there were, put them in the case. We had a local lug group, so we would have a display in our front window. And yes, we did sell Lego sets. At that time, they were much easier to come by, but within 3 years, Lego began cracking down on who could sell Lego because they were launching their Lego shops here, there, and everywhere. And so
Mm.
after a while, it became problematic to continually keep Lego in stock. So after about 3.5 years, we decided to get rid of the retail aspect and just focus on BrickForge, the mail order part of our accessory business.
How is Lego going about cracking down on small businesses carrying their product?
Well, I think they just felt the need to better vet some of these small businesses that were buying. They had accounts with Lego and they would order, and it was too much for Lego to send their reps around to make sure. What does your shop look like? Are you selling our items properly? Um, so they just decided to dial that back, and they severely limited which independent shops could carry. I think you had to be selling teddy bears and action figures and all these other things alongside. You couldn't be a Lego shop or even just a construction block shop.
Hmm, that's interesting. Did you guys attend many cons back in your day?
Yeah, our first con was in 2006. It was BrickFest.
Oh,
And it wasn't the first BrickFest. There had been BrickFests, but those BrickFests were all AFOL conventions. And at some point, um, I forget who was in charge of BrickFest at the time. I remember this Christina Hitchcock, Joe Mino was involved, but they decided to experiment with having a public day. And we attended with our very limited catalog, and this was in Washington D.C. and it was just a madhouse. People just couldn't get enough of the vendor. I mean, there was a Lego showed up. They did a little pop up shop, but across the hallway they had all of us, the black sheep, and I think Little Armory was there. We were there, and maybe two other vendors were there, and we got mobbed. And we walked away from that thinking, man, we need to do more of these. And in 2007 was a new show called Brick World, and um, Brian Bonahum was the purveyor of that show, and he decided to have that in Chicago. I believe Adam Reed Tucker was also partnering with him at the time. He's the one who helped launch the architecture series, and I think he now has a product called Atom Brick, if I'm not mistaken. And so those two together launched a show in Chicago, and we were one of, again, few vendors that attended that show, and it was great. I mean, we got our little acro bins full of parts out and made a colorful display, and interesting enough, the enigma that is Badger showed up at that show, and he actually helped us work our booth
What a guy.
for a
What a
period of
guy.
time. Yes, and it made up for all the flaming that went on the internet in those days, the Brick Arms versus BrickForge. But yeah, he's a swell guy. He was a great spokesperson for Brick Arms, and it was really neat to just to spend the day with him talking about minifig customization.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible to hear that there was such a good reception to third-party elements, even back then. So that's really cool. Here's a more oddball question. What prompted you guys to design your own minifigure system? You had those two-part arms and the swivel hips, the molded legs.
That's a good question. Um, Boy, I mean, at that time, we started seeing a lot of minifig customizers out there printing on Lego body parts. And there's, I believe I ran into Citizen Brick. I think it was either in 2012 or 2013 at Brick World Chicago, and that was really the first like professional printing I've seen. There was the Brick Engraver, who had
Mm.
started printing on Lego pieces as well. Eclipse Graphics, or I believe they were originally called Eclipse Bricks. But Victor was one of the early pioneers in that. And they were all receiving these letters from Lego saying, do not print on our bricks. And that eventually turned into,
Oh,
don't print corporate logos on our torsos. And I think that was
whoa, that is something I never heard of. Can you break that down a little more?
yeah, well, I'm probably saying more than I should, but I mean, it was no secret that Lego was cracking down on people putting corporate logos on minifigure torsos because that's what people did. Somebody selling pizzas or dog food. Hey, we have a corporate event coming up. We've got 300 employees. We saw what you did at this Lego show, and we want you to make 300 minifigures with our logos on it.
Right.
And so, oh, okay, yeah, we can do that. And so, these employees of the dog food company or the pizza company, we get these tchotchkes with a cool minifig and a logo on it, and they were great. And they became word of mouth. They were highly requested, and over time, Lego found out about it. And they said, "Well, here's the problem. This corporation that has this logo on our product may be performing business in a way that the Lego Group doesn't agree with. So we don't want you printing corporate logos on our minifigs anymore." Now, whether that was actually heeded or not is another story.
Mm.
But I definitely know those letters were going out. And at the time, I said, well, if these awesome, cool custom minifigure print companies can no longer print on Lego elements, then maybe I'll give them something to print on. And so that's when we started brainstorming about this new minifigure type, if you will. We didn't want to make it exactly like the official minifigure. We wanted some nuances in there. And some of the things that people were requesting was overmolded arms or multicolored arms, and we didn't know how to overmold at the time. So we're like, well, let's do a two-piece arm. That way people can swap them out. Let's do a two-part leg so people can have an upper and lower leg, whether it's boots or shorts. And so that's kind of what generated the decision to pursue that.
Mm. And hey, I mean, with enough time, Legos copied those ideas as well. But the sleeved arms were very nice when they first came out.
Yeah, and I think there's other people. Pad printing has become the fix. I think I didn't I didn't think the technology was there for these printing companies to say, hey, we can accurately do a two-tone arm through pad print.
Mm.
And I certainly didn't see the overmolding from Lego coming. And so, that was a bit of a misstep on my part. And, I think ultimately I was jealous of people like Victor and Joe. And I was like, man, and I want to make my own stuff. Al was making some good stuff, and there were some people doing UV print at the time. And I'm like, I want to do this. So I looked into maybe getting a UV printer. I never pulled the trigger on that, but I was like, I want access. I want my own body parts. I'm going to print on them. But um, we never got there. I just wasn't as passionate as I was about making accessories.
Mm, right on. So where did things go from there?
Well, again, gosh, I don't know where we are on the timeline per se, but we tried to be innovative as much as possible. One of the follow up molds, I believe, to the minifig mold was I guess we'll call it the World War II molds that we did, where it involved what we call the rigged system, where we have
Yes, yes, yes.
accessories attaching to other accessories. Um, and
Yeah.
I think we were looking at World War II as a possible genre that we just tested the waters with one mold. I think we had a grease gun and an M1 helmet, and we're like, let's really do this. Let's knock World War II out of the park, and then if it's successful, we can take the rig system on the other things. And one of the things I really was kind of envisioning was Ripley in Aliens, where I think it was Hicks or her, duct taped a flamethrower to the pulse rifle, and I was like, what if we could do that? What if we could create attachable and detachable accessories? And so we experimented with these. I think they're 1.5 millimeter pegs on the side of various elements, and then the complementary female part of that, the holes where the pegs would fit into. And so we really wanted to start pushing the envelope on minifig accessories and how people could start customizing their minifigures.
Yeah, I remember when those came out, the rigged vest, and I was quite a fan of those. The base rig design I've still even used on a figure here and there, just because the nice sort of minimalistic skeletonized webbing system looks good. So continuing on with the World War II line you had, you ended up like having a really nice packaging and everything for that, like a retail ready packaging. And I was looking through your Flickr, you had even attended Toy Fair with stuff like that. Was there a goal or intention behind that to really try and expand the business, um, beyond just your online fulfillment?
1,000%. We were speaking to our current list of resellers. I think we had maybe 50 plus at the time, and we were kind of inquiring to them as to, would anybody, how are you displaying BrickForge products, and even some of the other competing vendors? They're like, well, we just have them loose, so you just let these people pick through a bin. Yes. And so it's like, well, what if you had something that was in more of a clamshell package that was pre-configured per character? So in this case, we had launched the rigged system. We had the World War II, and really that was designed from its inception to actually create various World War II characters, whether it be a United States general or a German SS trooper, all those. So we had various characters, flame trooper, and so that's kind of how we designed the mold, was to come up with 6 to 12 different characters, and then we would pack them in a case and then ship the case out. We did get to that point. We did distribute those packs to several toy stores, including Bricks and Minifigs, and we wanted a larger distribution. We were saying, yeah, well, what if we wanted to get into a Target or a Walmart, or maybe um, somebody even a little bit smaller, perhaps? And so we scouted out Toy Fair. I believe it was 2014,
Yep, yep.
and I don't know if that was the year. We scouted out one year, and then we actually attended the next year. So I might be off by one year. But the year we
I recalled
attended,
seeing 2014 on the post.
okay, so we had our backdrop, and we had everything firing on all cylinders with the rig system and the packaging, and we were starting to get a lot of interest at the show, and our feet were getting tired, and then all of a sudden we see somebody taking pictures, and we weren't seasoned vendors at Toy Fair, but the person across from us was. And he said, you need to tell them to stop taking pictures, because they're not allowed to do that without your permission. So,
Hmm.
we kind of chased them off. Well, a few hours later, this person came back with an entourage, and we'll call them the suits. And of course, I get a closer look at the name tag, and it
Uh-oh.
says Lego A/S,
Oh
which
boy.
is code for Lego legal. And so clearly, we're like, oh, well, we captured more interest than we thought we would today. And that is what I believe was the catalyst into them enforcing their trademark that they literally just got a few months prior. So they had trademarked the silhouette, if you will, of the minifig itself,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot different than saying, oh, we got a patent on the head, we've got a patent on the torso. In this case, they're taking the model, the visual art of the minifigure, and trademarking it. And so, of course, just like everybody else was doing, our accessories were displayed on minifigures and our artwork was emulating minifigures. And so it wasn't very long, maybe 7 weeks, and we got a cease and desist from Lego.
Ah.
Um, and we weren't the only ones. We may have been the first when it came to the trademark, but there were definitely other people. And of course, we explored our options and we came to an agreement with Lego as to how we could present our accessories. And it really wasn't as bad as I thought. I think the biggest one was we had to change, we had to swap out the minifig silhouette in our logo to a flame. And that was
Okay.
the most egregious. And, I was like, well, if that's all we really have to do, it's no big deal. Um,
Yeah,
and so,
you lived to tell another, you lived another day. It wasn't you
yes,
came out relatively unscathed.
I live to be on the podcast here to tell everybody my
Yeah.
side of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And FYI, that wasn't actually the first time we received the cease and desist. We received one from Games Workshop. They're the
Whoa,
makers of
okay.
Warhammer.
Really?
And
What was that for?
so one of our most popular, and I think to this day, BrickForge's most popular accessory would be the Powered Assault helmet and the Powered Assault armor, along with the accoutrements from the Microsoft. Originally, Microsoft came Halo, so Master Chief, and so we originally called those elements Space Marines,
Ah.
which was a
Of
trademark
course. Of
term.
course they didn't like that.
Yeah, so they do a sweep of the internet and anything that says Space Marine on it. So I got a
Yeah.
letter for that. So that's what prompted the change to Powered Assault.
All right. Yeah, that is certainly the the most coveted item of your catalog. It's still talked about to this day, and still sought after. Has a lot of fans, and it's iconic for the silhouette it provided. It's a great piece.
And I think there's a new movie being released. So
Yeah, yeah.
I need to go tell my buddy he needs to start re-releasing that in a multitude of colors again.
I think for a while, like a few years back, they weren't really available on the site much, and there was a big uptick in people just asking around, like, "Hey, I'm really out here seeking the BrickForge Power Assault armor. If anyone has it, hit me up. I'll pay a good bit for it." Like, for a while there, you had it going.
Yep.
All right, yeah, it's no fun trying to navigate those legal troubles, but all in all, it seems like you came out relatively unscathed. Um, were you able to still sort of pursue that retail packaging kind of stuff?
Well, we sold out of what we had. We didn't. We chose not to reorder because um, that was kind of an eye opener. And in fact, the year before, I actually went overseas to visit the manufacturing facility, and something else that struck me was just the sheer number of knockoffs that had been floating around these. We call them the markets or the
Mm-hmm.
bazaars in Hong Kong. They're all over the
Mm-hmm.
place, and they were goofy. I mean, they were terrible. They were awfully done. The print was terrible. I don't know who was doing the artwork, but they clearly didn't understand the Lego aesthetic or even the measurements. And I brought a bunch home and I studied them. I said, you know what? It's not going to be long before these manufacturing companies whether Lego tries to rein them in or not, are going to become really good at this.
Yeah.
And they're going to start knocking off my products and Brick Arms products, and even now we've seen Brick Warriors products. And that was one thing that really spooked me. And I think the having the encounter at Toy Fair was kind of another a blow, if you will. And so that's when I kind of said, well, maybe I'm getting tired of the grind, because at that point in time, Brick Warriors kind of came out of nowhere. Well, I shouldn't say came out of nowhere. As a matter of fact, a small fact was the owner of Brick Warriors actually worked for both Will Chapman and myself at one
Wow.
point, doing design work, and then he kind of struck out on his own to do his own
Hmm.
thing, and there were others, and I was just like, man, dude, how long can I just keep this grind going where it's just this race to get these custom elements out before somebody else does? And at the time I was well, actually BrickForge was doing really well. It was running itself. True to small business and startups, you put a lot of work in at the beginning, but then when you become efficient, you realize you got tons of extra time. And so I started getting into education and guest speaking for entrepreneurship classes, marketing classes, and I started to really enjoy that. I thought maybe Red Bean was right. Maybe I should get into education like he did. And so I started kind of spinning off that way, seeing how could I bring my experience or take my experience and share that with the youth of today, and kind of show them how they can start their own companies. And that's when I think 2016 we started deciding, if there's an exit point, maybe we'll take it. And we started. We stopped creating anything new.
Hmm.
We really just kept up with some of the more popular items, and just kind of wanted to see where that was going to take us.
Right. So you were approached about selling BrickForge, or did you seek that opportunity out?
We just figured we would just sell out of inventory and quietly disappear into the mist.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um,
That would have been
but
sad. That would have been sad.
I, well, somebody had other plans because a lot of people noticed, we call them sales. They're really liquidation sales, but BrickForge, you're having an awful lot of sales. And soon some of our AFOL buddies kind of understood what was happening. Like, oh, you're really liquidating, aren't you? And,
Hmm.
sure, that, yeah, we're thinking of maybe getting out of the space, moving on to some other adventure. And that sparked, all at once, three different entities approached us about buying the business.
Wow.
And I suspect the good thing was we had been consolidating for the last year, um, because if they had approached us a year or two earlier, they wouldn't have been able to afford it.
Hmm.
But the fact that we were scaling back really invited some key players into the space, saying, "Oh, maybe we could do something with this. We've always wanted to do this. We liked what you guys have done." And so we actually entertained three bids all at the same time in late 2018, I believe it was.
That's really interesting that you had so much interest almost right off the bat once people started catching wind of what was going on. How did it proceed once you had all those offers on the table?
Well, we chose the person or persons who we thought would best take care of the company and best preserve the name.
Mm.
Um, I, they're down in Arkansas. They were show buddies of ours for quite some time, and they said, well, we want to tinker around. Um, you know, the primary owner's name is Richard, and he's a tinkerer. He loves to do a lot of things. He's played around with printing on minifig parts, um, and so he liked the idea of having this turnkey operation where he could make stuff and
Mm-hmm.
have it injection molded, and so he really lashed on that idea, and we just had some great conversations and decided it was just a perfect fit. and we came to an agreement on what the value was of the company, and you know, 13 hours later in a small trailer, everything was his.
Wow. Wow. So what's your relationship with Lego like now after you've sold your company and now you're sort of out of things?
Well, something interesting that was happening in 2017 that I thought might um, kind of get me back into it was I had a discussion with, at the time, Paul Smith Meyer. Um, and I think he's gone on to do other things, but he's the one who worked with Adam Reed Tucker to make architecture a reality. And I
Hmm.
believe he's the one that helped another company work with the robotics or the motorization aspect of Lego. And he was kind of this community outreach. He was trying to see how AFO Wells could play a role at the Lego company. And we actually spoke several times and for several hours about coming out with these battle packs for Lego stores. And,
Hmm.
I don't know what the specifics would have looked like, but that was a very intriguing idea to both of us. But a few months after these discussions, he left the Lego group, and quite
Hmm.
frankly, there was a lot of turnover in that year. So a lot of the
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
I knew at Lego, specifically in Billund or in their United States office, they left, and it was kind of sad. And so then I realized, well, there's not much of a relationship left with Lego corporate, and between some of these other things, I think we're just going to move forward. So after I sold the business, um, I just became a fan, a moderate fan. I had a whole bunch of Lego sets stored up and that I used for marketing purposes, um, and I said, I'm just not going to go crazy buying things because I was really buying things to sell my stuff, um,
Hmm.
using Lego as a backdrop. And I would love to build it and going to shows and being around other AFOLs. I was in a local lug here in Ohio. I joined Virtual Lug, I think, in 2014, and we had some awesome builds. So I really enjoyed the building aspect of it, but really it was because I was already immersed in the community. And I think also part of it was I had two small boys at the time. And by the time 2018 rolled out, they aged out of Lego. I stopped going to shows because I didn't necessarily need to sell anything at shows, and so my enthusiasm for the brick, sort of cut down quite a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, that's understandable. The idea of Lego having those accessory packs is quite interesting. I'd love to see them sort of pursue something like that in the future, as long as it doesn't sort of impede any other companies who might have a competing interest just for Lego to come and take their territory. That'd be unfortunate, but it's a cool idea nevertheless.
Well, they have the minifig battle packs with the figures in it, and those are pretty sweet. But they always came with the same swords and the same helmets and the same axes or the same accessories. And so the idea was, well, let's just do a bundle of accessories and
Yeah.
theme it out by genre, and they might be like $3-4 packs or something like that. And that was at the time that the collectible minifigs were moving in pretty strong, and they just saw these impulse shoppers buying these little grab bags, and they thought that might be a really neat thing to offer in the Lego shops.
Hmm. All right. I'm relatively set. I think I've hit kind of all my questions. Do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on?
I suppose I could talk customization all day and the history of how this. I think I've heard in past podcasts, we're in the golden age of customization. Is that what I'm hearing?
Um, I don't know how many other people are echoing the sentiment, but I would certainly say so myself. There's been a great uptick in a lot of the companies that are producing stuff. There's more companies than ever. There's more people in the community active than ever, I'd feel like. So, yeah.
I would agree. I think we are in the golden age, and I think BrickForge was part of that silver age, and perhaps even early bronze age,
Mhm.
in the late '90s, as the predecessor to BrickForge. We were just kind of tinkering around with things, but we made it happen. And I always like to think, we paved the way for these dozens and dozens of companies to express themselves through artistic means by either printing on Lego minifigures or designing their own accessories and selling them. So I think it's neat that we're in the golden age and we've hit that. I don't know what comes after at this point, to be honest with you.
Uh, the platinum age? I don't know. We continue going up from here. That's for sure.
I'm definitely been keeping tabs on the goings ons in the customization community, but I will admit I'm starting to lose track of those printing on minifigs, and I will say I am a pad print snob.
Mm.
When I first was tinkering around with UV print, there was a local community college that had a UV printer, and I asked the manufacturer to send me some samples. I sent them a whole bunch of Lego, sent them some designs. So I actually have these prototype designs UV printed on Lego body parts, and I didn't like it. I just the way the light hit the ink just totally
Mm.
turned me off the UV, and I just don't like it. Now maybe some technology's moved up to where it's a little bit better, but the smoothness of the pad print, you just can't match that.
Yeah, it's unmatchable. But what's unfortunate is there's a lot of bad applicators of the UV process, so it gives it a really bad rap. But there'll always be a difference in quality. But there's some exceptional work out there in the UV space.
Well, and I think that's why I was shocked when I first came across Citizen Brick at that Brick World, and I'm like, man, this is neat stuff. And I think I spent like $10 on the Heavy Metal Enthusiast version 1,
Mm.
and um, it was either that show or the next show. Joe and I, we did some trading. We would always talk about the state of things in the customization community. He started bringing this at the time. I think it was just this Tupperware bowl. He called it his
Yeah.
stash, and it was full of just I don't want to call them misprints per se because
Right.
the prints were accurate, but they were tests right on different color
Yeah.
heads he had
Alternative
lying around.
colors.
And I remember, my kids, well, gosh, they were 8 or 9, 10 at the time, and they were like, go get me some lime green heads from Citizen Brew with these. I don't know. I just started picking them out. I tossed them a few bucks, we do some trading. And so I accumulated quite a few that way. And I think I picked up the first baby he made and the original supercomputer. So, I was a big fan of Joe's work for quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, and you recently liquidated a few of those items. What's it like seeing how far that the collector side of his products has come and the prices they can fetch nowadays?
Well, I mean, prices aside, there's a whole Facebook group, and there's in the forums that still exist, there's still a lot of chatter that goes on about CB as they call it now,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to find those old grails, and I'm just like, man, I can't believe that. Even a rare Lego figure. Okay, maybe not as rare as the Cloud City Boba Fett, but some of the more rare ones are just $50, $75. But here we have a aftermarket pad printed Lego minifigure by a third party, and it's several $100s, and I'm just shocked. But that's just a testament to Joe's work. I mean, he stays true to his form in terms of the aesthetic of Lego, and his kind of, we'll say, humorous. I'll say humorous designs, and so I appreciate that. Victor was another one. I think he used to buy a lot of bottles from us and print on
Yeah.
our minifig bottles in different colors.
Yeah, he made the liquor packs with all sorts of branding on the bottles.
And those were hilarious. I absolutely love those, and I really wish I could have partnered more with him and done something with Joe. But we're all artists, and we were all in our separate directions, and occasionally we crossed paths and had a few laughs. But ultimately, I think it's just the most important thing is we just respected what each other did, and that was one of the best things about the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see yourself ever getting back into Lego in a bigger capacity, or just keep things as it is, a Lego set here or there if it ever interested you.
No, it's like the crypto market. You know, the people that were mining Bitcoin in the early days and hung on to it, and then it just hit that spike. That's not going to happen again. Okay, so I really don't have any other ideas on how to complement existing Lego products, knowing full well that Lego will probably just copy the idea someday anyway. So
Mm.
I'm happy being a satisfied casual observer as far as what other people are doing. Um, I sometimes suspect I would go back to a Lego show, and I probably will buy a few things. But I just have other interests at the moment, and I'm just really tied up in some of those things.
Mm. Well, you can rest assured that you walked so all these companies now can run. You can be rest assured in your legacy. Um, Speaking to you being a bit of a casual observer nowadays, have you caught wind of much of the resin printing technology that's come around?
I've seen some of it. I think the latest I've seen was K Town. Bricks has a Gondor helmet and maybe another Lord of the Rings esque helmet. Um, and those look a lot smoother than what I remember. We used to get our prototypes done through Shapeways,
Oh,
and
jeez, yeah.
it, but they had, I mean, they were modifying 3D printers to where they were coming out pretty smooth. And while I wouldn't ever sell any accessories printed straight up from Shapeways, first of all, they're really expensive. Um, I think that technology has come a long way. So I haven't been following it, but I've seen some of the products coming out of it, and some are better than others.
Mm. Yeah, it's really I don't know, it's making the production of like parts a lot more accessible to a much wider audience. It's kind of like um, you've already used crypto as an analogy, so I'll do it as well. Decentralizing things from these big companies, and it's allowing a lot smaller people just have an idea to get into the space, which has been really interesting to see.
Yeah, and kind of maybe rewinding a few minutes. Another thing I just find startling is a lot of these artists getting into this, whether it is the resin printing or plastic injector molded accessories or printing, whether it's through UV. These were all the kids I used to sell to at shows,
Yeah.
and that just blows my mind. Um, that not just BrickForge, but all of us were such an inspiration that they grew up craving to do the same thing and take this to the next level with available technology. So in part, I just kind of feel like this, you know, curmudgeony old person. It's like I'm going to move over and make room for the next generation and just kind of sit back and see what they're doing.
Hmm. That's kind of beautiful. I never saw it so much in that way that you were really um, planting the seed in a lot of these people who are now taking the reins to produce something even further. That is great. All right. Would you like to move on into Copper Drop here? Wrap things up?
Sure, I think we're probably getting to that point in time. I don't. Hopefully, I'm not boring anybody.
No, no. All right. Since you've already mentioned K Town, we'll hit it up with the first item here. Ulrich von. I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce the last name. Uh, Jungian.
Jungian.
Yeah, that's probably about right. Um, I mean, you already mentioning a little bit of disdain for UV printing, but K Town is certainly an exception, at least in my book, as one who does it right. How you feeling about this guy?
So early on, I have a bit of a. So I used to, gosh, decals aside, I created this system out of paper. It was like these little. I don't know how to explain it, but back in the day, there were these cutouts that girls would cut out clothing and fold these tabs and put it on paper dolls.
Hmm.
And I created this system of folding paper, if you will, for minifigs, and it would wrap around them, kind of this full body wrap. And, it would have the paper kind of hang down below the hips a little bit. And I would make all sorts of knights. And one of them was a Teutonic knight, and it looked a lot like Ulrich. So I already like the design. And I'm partial to Castle, but I'm a pad print snob, so I think I would have to drop this one. Um,
Understandable.
but I'll drop that with saying I love some of their newer pad printed stuff. They have a hilarious tile that has a Lego goat on it.
Oh yeah, the goat. Yes, yeah, that's really funny.
And some of their armor pieces are stellar. So I really hope they bring back Ulrich and some of the other knights, but using the print pad technology, because there's been a few times that I almost pulled the trigger on these, because really they're affordable and they're well done, but just my history with UV print, I just couldn't do it. But if it was pad print, yeah, I probably would. So, but for now, I got to drop this one.
Yeah, it certainly seems like that'll be in the future now that they have a four color machine, I believe. So, looking forward to whatever K Town whips out. All right, next item up. Brick Arms is teasing a new rifle, the Ion rifle. How you feeling about this guy?
Well, this looks a lot like the reloaded stuff. So I don't know if this is overmolded. I'll assume it's overmolded.
Yeah, it is.
BrickForge would actually print. So on our accessories, it looked overmolded, but this is just actually an ink application.
Hmm.
I remember they made an older ion rifle mold, and in fact, BrickForge had a series of Star Wars guns that had the Jawa Ion blaster. I think we call it the Ion blaster. Um, this one looks pretty sweet, um, but I know how much those reloaded parts go for, and if this one's upwards of $15 to $20, I might pass on it. But if it's affordable, um, I hope they produce the dark brown one because I might pick one of those up. So
Yeah,
maybe somewhere in between copper crop.
yeah.
Can I say
Like the
crop?
design. A crop? I like. Oh, yes. You've introduced something new here. It's a crop. It's a crop. It's price dependent. I like it. Last item up here. Another pseudo Brick Arms item, but with Eclipse graphics, the printed Dark Blades into the Cyber Blades with all sorts of unique sort of cyberpunk details. How are you feeling about these?
So I actually saw these the other day, and this is crazy because in the last several months I've just kind of hopped back into it just to see what's going on after a very long hiatus, um, and I actually like these. Um, and, am I going to buy just one and pay shipping? No. So I think I will cop like five of these if I can get one of each color, because they are pretty sweet. So I tip my hat to Brick Arms for the mold and Eclipse Graphics for the print. I will definitely cop one of these or a few.
Oh, that's great to hear. It's certainly an exciting item, and it's you mentioning previously attempts to collaborate with other people in the space, and this is just an excellent example of collaboration gone well in the community.
It's nice to see those from the Silver Age, growing strong in the Golden Age, and as you said, collaborating and coming up with new things. And sometimes I regret I'm not there, but I look forward to seeing what all these other guys and even BrickForge seeing what they're putting out next. I think they have a new sword or two that they've been releasing, as far as their Knights pack goes. So again, I would be remiss if I didn't urge your audience to at least go check out BrickForge if they haven't in the last few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely going to as well, and it was exciting to hear that you've put someone who's innovative at the helm, who was really excited to get down into the nitty gritty and expand things and try new stuff out. So I look forward to hopefully some interesting designs in the future from them. All right, we've made it all the way through. Thank you so much for the time, Kyle. It was great getting to talk to you. Do you have any last thoughts for the audience?
I would always we used to do some podcasts before they were really even called podcasts, and I would just always say, keep on Mizen. Mizen's kind of
Mizen.
yeah, Mizen's my apostrophe shortened term for customizing. So keep on Mizen.
Oh, man, you're coming with all sorts of terms. I had a I had to put you onto the cop lingo, but you're putting me onto all sorts of things now too. So this is coming around.
Yeah.
Keep it Maizen. I like it. All right. Thank you. Have a great night, man.
All right. Bye, everyone.
And that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thank you all for listening, and I really appreciate you joining me for this episode, Kyle. If you enjoyed this episode, like I said at the top of the show, go on Spotify or iTunes and rate us 5 stars. And if you're a hater, don't worry about it. Don't just leave it blank. Leave it blank. You didn't hear anything I just said. Moving on, you could also share us on Instagram, repost the wrap-up post, or share the podcast with a friend. It's all appreciated. All the love. Thank you guys. See you next time.